This webinar is the first of the 3 webinars leading up to the Just a Click Away National Conference on February 23rd and 24th in Vancouver, and more on that in just a few moments. The pre-conference webinars feature approaches being used in various jurisdictions to provide access online to public legal education and information. So the agenda today, we have a slide of the agenda. Okay, so we're going to do housekeeping introductions. Brenda's going to talk about the Just a Click Away initiative. Drew will talk about Clicklaw. Fiona will talk about CLEONet. And then we will have some time. We don't know if it'll be 15 minutes. We will have time for questions and some wrap-up. And just to look at the housekeeping sort of guidelines, your phones are on mute automatically. And if you have questions, we encourage you to use that chat feature on the right-hand side.
So you have to click on the chat.
The hand, yes, it's the hand.
It's the chat arrow.
Just above.
If you click on the chat arrow pointing at chat, it will expand it so you can see
So
it.
yeah, there's a little drop down chat, and then there's a little hand that you can click on that shows that you want to ask her a question using the phone. And we will encourage you to ask questions during the presentations, but we won't be answering them until after the presentation. So now I'd like to introduce our 2 panelists who will be telling the stories of 2 portal websites. Drew Jackson is Director of Client Services at Courthouse Libraries, BC. Drew is a lawyer and librarian, and he led the initial development of Clicklaw in his former role at Courthouse Libraries as Manager of Community Outreach. Drew will be presenting about Clicklaw, BC's portal to online public legal education and information. And Fiona McCool, CLEONet Project Manager, a project of CLEO, which is Community Legal Education Ontario. She's led the development and growth of CLEONet, Ontario's portal to online public legal education and information aimed at service providers and intermediaries in that province. And Fiona will be presenting about CLEONet. But first of all, we wanted to give you a brief overview of the Just a Click Away project. So Brenda Rose is the Clicklaw project coordinator and the coordinator for the Just a Click Away project. Here's Brenda.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This webinar is part of the Just a Click Away initiative, which is led by Courthouse Libraries, BC. It's funded by the Law Foundation of Ontario's Access to Justice Fund. So the goal of the Just a Click Away project is to look at how we use technology to provide public legal education and information to the people of Canada. In phase 1 of our project, we teamed up with Educalois in Quebec to explore how social media can be used with public legal education and information. Educalois hosted 2 events in Montreal in October: the Public Legal Education Association of Canada National Conference, their annual meeting, and Dire le droit pour être compris, which was a conference looking at plain language and the law. We produced a report on these events, and that is now available on our project website at www.justaclickaway.ca. The second part of our project is this webinar series. These 3 webinars will give you a peek under the hood of 7 different websites. Today we'll be looking at Clicklaw and CLEONet. On Tuesday, January 25th, we'll be looking at ACJNet site, which has now just been relaunched as LawNet. The second, POVNet, and lawhelp.org. Lawhelp.org is an American site, and they are kindly sharing their experience with public legal education portal sites in over 20 U.S. sites. On February 8th, we will be looking at Educalois and inmylanguage.org. So these webinars are being recorded and will be made available for anyone to watch afterwards. We'll also be producing a report on these webinars, and the report will be posted on our project website. The intention is that the overview and discussion of these websites during these webinars will lay the foundation for a deeper discussion next month at our national conference. So this discussion and lots of other discussion will take place at this conference in Vancouver, February 23rd and 24th, 2011. The conference will also include opportunities for Please stand by.
Oh, hi, it sounds like the sound went off for a moment, but the sound is now back on. Why don't we do this, just to confirm. I see Hubert and a few others have said all is good, it's back. By the way, this is Drew Jackson here chiming in. But I thought one thing a housekeeping thing that would be good to do, and this will help clarify whether everybody is good sound-wise, is why don't we clear off your raised hand, and you can do that by clicking a second time on the little hand button below the participants list. And then if anybody's hand is still up in a few moments, we'll assume that means that you are having problems in some form. Okay, that's great. It looks like the hands have just quickly disappeared. So that's excellent.
Okay. So I'm not really sure where to pick up from or where we got cut off there.
So in fact, I'll jump in more fully here. I think we're about to jump into the two presentation segments. My name is Drew Jackson. I'm from Courthouse Libraries BC in Vancouver, and I'm delighted to be with you here today. And thank you all very much for bearing with us as we are stepping out on a limb here and trying out a platform that we have had some experience with, a junior version, if you will, and this is the next level up, and it's throwing us a few curveballs. The reason we went to the next level up is that we were frankly surprised at the interest in these webinars, and so once we got over 25 participants, we needed to go up to the next level of this platform in the last week. Without further ado, I'm going to start in on telling the story of Clicklaw, one of the two public legal education portal websites that we're highlighting or focusing in on here today together with CLEONet. So you should now be able to see another slide presentation for Clicklaw. And just to set the framework here, a quick overview of what I'll cover in the next 10, 12, 15 minutes at the very most. I wanted to start with a bit of defining some terms in terms of what we mean when we say a portal website, which is a term that you'll hear a fair bit, I think, over these webinar series. Then wanted to talk about the story of Clicklaw, and I'll keep it to 3 minutes or less. Then highlight a few aspects of what makes Clicklaw unique, or what we think it makes Clicklaw unique. And then as well, do a quick demo to do some of that, to highlight some of those aspects, and then talk a little bit about when having a portal website makes sense. Some of the things to consider if you're in a jurisdiction, for example, it doesn't currently have a single point of entry portal type of site. So in terms of what we mean when we use the term portal, this definition from Merriam-Webster's Online Dictionary, 2010 edition. 5 different definitions of the term portal. The first one I kept in because it's such an exotic-sounding definition: door, entrance, especially a grand or imposing one. When we build a portal website, that's part of our hope is that we'll have something grand, but of course that isn't the definition specifically related to a website that is a portal, but rather it's the 5th definition, which is a site serving as a guide or point of entry to the World Wide Web, and usually including a search engine or a collection of links to other sites arranged especially by topic. So a portal is a website, and what makes it a bit different from other websites is the degree to which it is offering a gateway into other websites, other content from outside that website. Now, because of the nature of the web, every website includes some links to other sites. That's what makes the web what it is, the hyperlinking. But what is unique about a portal is that is the purpose. The primary purpose of the site is providing a window or portal into content from other websites. So I wanted to tell the story of Clicklaw in 3 minutes or less. A key element of Clicklaw, which was, by the way, initially developed 2 years ago and launched in early 2009. So we're now coming up on our 2-year anniversary shortly. And part of the context for Clicklaw is that in British Columbia, we're very fortunate to have a strong history of public legal education and information. A number of agencies developing resources for many years now that are designed specifically for the public. And those agencies were collaborating pre-Clicklaw to raise awareness of public legal education from across the spectrum of agencies that produced PLEI in BC. So, for example, a print catalog of resources from over 20 organizations in BC that were public legal education resources was published in a couple of different editions through the 2000s. So here's the 2006-07 edition, and this was the beginning, if you will, of the collaboration that ultimately led to the development of a website that would serve that same function. Just to give you a bit of a flavor of BC's depth and range of PLEI, the Justice Education Society has provided a great deal of leadership in developing websites, videos, learning tools. As well, we've got another sole-purpose PLEI provider in People's Law School that has a rich collection of booklets, as well as programs. Then our legal aid provider, Legal Services Society, has been very active in PLEI for many years and have a strong collection of booklets, websites, and videos. And our Canadian Bar Association BC branch, to my understanding, is unique in Canada of all the branches of the shouldn't say unique in that respect. Other Canadian Bar Association branches have also been active, but the BC branch has developed a very large collection of fact sheets that's called their Dial-A-Law program, and those fact sheets are over 130 topics now available online as well as through the telephone and in multiple languages. And then our government has been very active in public legal education, developing public-focused resources for victims, litigants, families, and so on. So the problem has been that as this information has become more and more available on the internet, a very good thing, it has remained hard, or it had remained hard prior to Clicklaw, we like to think, for the public to find that information, even though it was available increasingly through the internet. And a key problem, as I think many of you will sympathize with, is the difficulty for the public in searching for legal information. What search terms do they use? The language of law is so technical that creates challenges in using search engines that rely on primarily search terms to find stuff. And then this public legal education spread across dozens of very varied websites that work differently, behave differently. And of course, there's the variable accuracy and variable reliability of information on the internet. So Clicklaw was conceived and developed with a mission to offer a unified, trustworthy point of entry online, providing equitable access to quality legal information, education, and help for British Columbians. And as a portal website, an entry point into a wide range of websites, 30 organizations formally participating in Clicklaw as well as selected others. And we'll talk in a moment about what we mean by formally participating. And at Courthouse Libraries BC, we led the initiative, and it was generously funded by the BC Law Foundation. So a little bit about what makes Clicklaw unique. I want to highlight 4 things, and I'm going to do this through a demo, but just to introduce the 4 things to highlight, we put a lot of emphasis on features that guide the public to public legal education information by putting an accent on plain language terminology and developing something we call common questions, and we'll give you a quick snapshot of that. As well, Clicklaw features a map of services in addition to informational and educational resources, and we'll show you a quick introduction to that if you haven't seen that before. And then a key element of what makes Clicklaw unique is that we used a model that features setting the contributor organizations, the agencies that develop public legal education, setting them up to add and update content directly on Clicklaw. At the library here, we provide an oversight role, but we're not put it this way, people do not have to get our approval to put things up. We provide more of a keeping things on track generally and review type of a role. And we'll give you a quick demo of how that functionality works on Clicklaw. And then wanted to introduce how Clicklaw is part of a program that provides options on accessing legal information through the internet, but also in public libraries and courthouse libraries in BC. So a quick demo here to highlight a couple of these unique features. And I'm going to bring up the Clicklaw website here. So in a moment, you should now see a website appear, and we'll do a 3-minute demo. So the first thing when we get the site up on the screen here that I want to highlight is, I'll use a couple of scenarios here to do this. The first one is, it's a member of the public who has been named the executor of an estate. And this is completely new to them. They're trying to learn what is involved in being an executor. On the Clicklaw site here, right on the home page, we've put a block of topics under the heading Solve Problems. And we've clustered these topics in categories that we hope members of the public can connect to. So under Your Family, we'll click on Wills, Estates, and Life Planning, and we see a range of resources right away and can immediately click into some of these resources. For example, Your Duties as an Executor, one of the Canadian Bar Association fact sheets, or Being an Executor, one of the People's Law School booklets. And with just a couple of clicks, someone can be well on their way towards accessing information on their topic of interest. Another feature that we spent quite a bit of time on was developing what we call common questions. And I'm going to click into this one about being an executor and having to do the work myself. These answers are quite short. This is actually one of the longer ones. And what they're trying to do is provide a little bit of a mini guide into some of the key public legal education resources on that question. So for example, we can now go into About Wills and Estates, which is from the provincial government, and click right into that resource. I'm now going to shift gears and highlight what we call the Clicklaw Help Map, which is another key part of the site that's not about public legal education and information so much as it is about connecting people with services that might provide assistance in their community. with a legal problem. So I'm going to search for a small community in British Columbia on Vancouver Island called Campbell River, and let's say we're looking for somebody who is, we're trying to assist somebody who is needing some help with a family law matter, and they are in Campbell River in this small community on Vancouver Island. Our search results show us a Google map here of Campbell River with a number of results highlighted, and we can, on the left-hand side here of the screen, click Family Law, which now narrows our results to family law services in Campbell River. And now clicking on, for example, the Provincial Court Family Duty Council will zero in on that service on the map and provide some details, as well as a link over to more information on that Provincial Court Family Duty Council service from our British Columbia Legal Aid Agency. The final thing I wanted to show you is a quick introduction to the contributor experience, which is one of the aspects that we think makes Clicklaw fairly unique. Law Help, the U.S. site that we'll see featured in the next webinar, also has a contributor login where agencies can directly add and change material. But we'll give you a flavor for how the Clicklaw one works in 1 minute or less. So there's a login through the internet, and now I've got access as site editor, but each of over 30 agencies now have been set up to do this directly themselves and can go in to manage their own resources and services on the Clicklaw site. So by clicking here, for example, the People's Law School, at this point, this would simulate the People's Law School experience. They wouldn't see other stuff, just their own information on Clicklaw. And let's say we wanted to, they wanted to log in and make a change to that executor booklet. They can search within their own collection of material and then go to view or edit that material. And here is the entry on Clicklaw for that being an executor booklet. And at this point, they can edit the resource. And let's say they had done an update where they've now expanded the book and there's some additional information for seniors. They can add a new topic, make any other adjustments, and click Publish. Now, this is the live Clicklaw site, so I will not do this for People's Law School, but rather, at this point, I will shut down the sharing and wrap up with a couple of thoughts. And as I head into that, I'll mention the final feature that we wanted to highlight that we think makes Clicklaw unique, and that is that at Courthouse Libraries here in British Columbia, we've worked to create an integrated package of options on accessing legal information and education in the province, as well as services for helping. And so there's the Clicklaw website, and within that, the Help Map search tool to find someone who can help with legal problems. And then as well, we operate a program called Law Matters, where we're working with all 200 plus public libraries in the province to help them provide current legal information that is plain language and accessible, and support public librarians in having more confidence in fielding legal reference questions. And then at Courthouse Libraries, we have a network of 30 libraries and courthouses across BC where more in-depth information and assistance can be accessed to the public. And we are mandated to serve both the public as well as the legal community here at in British Columbia, which is not necessarily the case in all provinces for equivalent law libraries. And as I wrap up, a few thoughts then on when does a portal site make sense? To our mind, there's a couple of key things, and this is not an exhaustive list, but just to give you a couple of key thoughts. One is when public legal education in a jurisdiction is spread across the websites of a number of agencies. A portal can help knit those sites together and provide a single point of entry into those sites. Another dimension is when there's a keen interest in connecting informational resources and helping services, such as what we've done with the help map, where in one site, a member of the public can connect with information to learn more about the situation or the type of situation they're in, and also start tapping into the kinds of services that might be able to help with that problem. And then another key factor is where there's a culture or at least a strong potential for collaboration amongst the agencies providing public legal education. And this is a constant element of working within PLEI, as everybody who's doing this kind of work knows, is the importance of collaboration and also the challenges. Lots of payoffs, but lots of challenges in collaborating, because it's not always easy, it's not always fast, but certainly a lot of rewards. So that was the presentation part. We invite questions, and we'll hold off on answering questions until after Fiona McCool has had a chance to provide a presentation on Clicklaw, on CLEONet rather.
So let's turn control over to Fiona.
Hi there, can everybody hear me? This is Fiona McCool from CLEO, Community Legal Education Ontario. So I wanted to thank you all for being here, and to thank Drew and Brenda and Janet for the opportunity. So again, we are a little bit older. I used to describe us in the age of a child, saying, well, we're still a toddler, but having launched in 2005, I guess we're in the school system now as a web project. So we've been around since the project formally started in 2004. We went live in 2005. So again, some of the same reasons that CLEONet needed to exist are some of the same reasons that Drew described in terms of Clicklaw. I think in the case of Ontario, it was even more, the PLEI was out there, is very, very distributed. And when I first took this job as a project manager, not having been a lawyer, not as familiar with the legal system, the people here sort of said, it's not like there's a tightly knit association of PLEI providers in Ontario that get together regularly and this is going to be a no-brainer. You're going to have to do a huge amount of outreach and kind of create a community around some of this stuff. So CLEO, Community Legal Education Ontario, is a big producer of print, now not exclusively print, but that's sort of what they were known for, doing a huge amount of PLEI in Ontario. Their sole mandate is to provide public legal education here at CLEO. And so CLEO has done that for 30 years. And lots of other organizations in Ontario were doing it too. And oftentimes they would send their materials at that time in print to CLEO, who would try and keep it in the library. And it just seemed obvious that the internet needed to be a tool to allow this to be much more transparent and powerful and reach more people. So CLEONet was born with generous support from the Law Foundation of Ontario. So again, our site offers the latest legal information, and so we call those resources. So that's pieces of PLEI, public legal education and information materials. We also provide news and events around changes in the law reform campaigns, that kind of thing. And in the last year, we've done a pretty huge amount of public legal education webinars. So kind of experiences like we're all on here today, except legal workshops, and those have been for community service providers. So again, we do that on a wide range of legal topics, mainly issues confronting low-income and marginalized communities in Ontario. And the information on our site is produced by over 200 community organizations and legal clinics across Ontario. Unlike CLEONet, unlike Clicklaw, our site was originally designed for community workers and advocates who work with low-income and disadvantaged communities. The site's open to the public, and it is widely used by the public, and we've seen through our own evaluation and through polling and statistics that it's increasingly being used more and more by the general public. So it's almost a 50-50 split between people who use the site for clients, quote-unquote, and people who use the site to find information for themselves, a friend, or a family member. But we originally wanted CLEONet to be for the public because we wanted to make sure that the information was passed on to, and we relied on that huge network of community workers and advocates who could play that role in ensuring legal accuracy and responsibly getting the information to their clients. So they're our audience because they're a huge outreach vehicle, and they're also trusted intermediaries who can help the clients who may, at least at that time, have a lot of difficulty using the internet directly. So that was the decision at the time for us to design the entire site for service providers. And now we are in the early development stages of building a new legal information site for the public. So of course we will continue to serve those community workers and advocates, but we'll also present a whole new range of information and extra features for the general public in Ontario. So we're excited to be moving in that direction as well. So this is what CLEONet looks like. Rather than surfing to the site, which I of course can do, I just thought I'd have some screen capture so it might be a little faster given the fact that we have a lot of ground to cover, and hopefully we can have some great questions and answers. So this is CLEONet. The main, again, sections of our site, the main things that we do is the resources collection, so that's legal information, news and events, and webinars. And these are our topics. And you'll see as we go through that we also have layers of subtopics as well. So we have a taxonomy, much like Clicklaw does, and Clicklaw and CLEONet have informally shared lots of great wisdom and information, and certainly we have greatly benefited from looking at the Clicklaw model, and I hope they would say the same in terms of taking a look at some of the stuff we've done to try and make such complex information clear to people. So again, resources is the main focus of our site, and we also try to do a focus on information in other languages. That's a huge gap that we try to fill here at CLEONet. So there is some information that's been produced, and more is being produced in languages other than English and French. The CLEONet plays an important role in providing a single place to find a lot of that stuff and sort through it. And it also emphasizes gaps. It oftentimes will emphasize the fact that there isn't enough. And it's also nice to have a portal for PLEI providers to kind of touch base with some needs, to take a look at what's missing, to take a look at what niche they could fill. So we also sort of play that role. So again, once you go and choose a topic, in this case abuse and family violence, we provide subtopics, and again, that's our taxonomy. And we also try to provide some direction if you are in the quote-unquote wrong section. So for lay people or people who don't have a legal background, and of course I'm one of them, we give some see-alsos and some redirects. And over here, we also provide, and I'll explain this a little bit later, but one of the things that I think makes CLEONet unique is that we have built the entire site so that it is exportable in the form of feeds and a variety of tools so that our information updates can be received by email, of course, but they can also be transplanted and placed on different websites. The nice thing about a portal is we're not all empire building to try to create the single giant site and force everyone to use it. As long as we get the information that has been produced by many out to the most people, we're happy to have our information appearing on a variety of other sites. So we have designed CLEONet from the get-go to be sort of transparent and portable in terms of the information structure. So again, much like Clicklaw, when you get our brief descriptions of a particular resource that you found by going through the topics and subtopics or by searching, we provide some of that detailed metadata on it, such as information on the producer, how to get in touch with them, the various topics it's in, and then you can click through to the full and original publication, PDF, video, etc. And we have over 295 producing organizations. So we had a community advisory group, and we continue to work closely with some key producers. But unlike Clicklaw, we really kind of went out there and beat the bushes to get the most possible organizations out there who did this kind of work. And so we have a very large group of organizations who have contributed and continue to contribute their materials to us. And some of them don't have websites, so there's been a challenge. Sometimes we have taken materials and put them on CLEONet because otherwise they would in fact not be on the internet, which I think may be a product of the fact that we did this much like a long time ago, and perhaps that was not as common. But surprisingly, there are still a lot of organizations who are doing direct service to clients who do important PLEI work, and they may do it exclusively, in print. And so we played a role in terms of trying to get some stuff up that otherwise has no place it can be posted. And again, this is the way in which that you can search through our information in various languages. And again, this is our news page. And the news, although it's not our primary focus, has been a very powerful way to get traffic to the site. So we have an email bulletin that people get, which kind of collects all the information we've added to the site each day and emails it out. And we try to put a few news events up a day. And it's been much easy to do that because of Facebook and Twitter, and social media has allowed us to have a much more easy way to obtain that kind of information. But this is often a really important way to promote fast-moving information around law reform, around campaigns and social justice issues, and it also helps people be aware of changes in the law. It also gives us a chance to get collective patting on the back of some of the hard work of clinics to do test case legislation and make important changes in the law. And as of September, not this September, but the September before, we started doing legal information webinars. And the reason we did this was when we started, and I don't know if this is true of Clicklaw, but when we started, one of the things we hoped would happen is that organizations that do a lot of PLEI workshops in person with clients and with service providers would be able to share their workshops with one another. And easier said than done, because oftentimes the only tangible, unless you could go and videotape every single workshop, which certainly we didn't have resources to do, all you would have was somebody's handouts or their PowerPoint. And with information that's this challenging to convey and is this difficult, someone's PowerPoint doesn't usually stand alone. So to create a toolkit that is a standalone train the trainer package is usually something that a lot of nonprofit organizations don't have the means and resources to produce. So although we wanted lots of workshop materials to be shared, it was actually really difficult to do that. So with webinars, we thought, well, a lot of clinics in Ontario and social justice organizations do legal information workshops for newcomers on a particular issue, and so maybe they could work with us and we could deliver it over the internet. So it was really an experiment, and it's been surprisingly successful because a lot of organizations that aren't exactly famous for enjoying using technology have been eager to do this because they get asked to do in-person workshops over and over and over again all across Ontario, which is a very large province. They travel tremendous distances to often repeat that same information, and they're really happy to be able to do it here. So we've been doing webinars. We've done, you can see this is the webinar page that we have. You can browse by topic and look at our upcoming ones. We've done a whole series of them on consumer law, which is particular, very specific issues that face low-income people, like energy contracts and cell phone contracts and identity theft and that kind of stuff. And we've done them on main sort of areas of law that affect low-income people. So usually they have between 12 and 50, in some cases 60 participants, and the producing organization hasn't usually ever done a webinar. They give us a PowerPoint, we take care of the rest, and they can take questions and we archive them and people can watch them later. And here's an example of one on collection agencies. So you can get the materials and download the PDFs and the PowerPoints if you want to reuse them and incorporate them into your own workshop. But for people who want the actual information, they just click play and they can watch it and listen to it after the fact. And they're some of our most accessed materials on CLEONet, even though they're an hour long, and I sort of thought that they wouldn't be looked at in huge numbers because it can be quite a commitment to watch them. They're very surprisingly popular, so we're happy with how well that project has succeeded with such a small budget and such a small amount of resources. We've also, of course, as I mentioned earlier, CLEO is the huge producer of original legal information. So we decided to produce these legal rights guides. So we've done two so far, one in rental housing and one in social assistance, very high demand areas of PLEI. And these are like this is like a mini website within CLEONet that provides an opportunity for CLEO to present quite detailed legal information developed for online use. So we hope to do more of that as well. And this is that example I was talking about in terms of CLEONet content feeds. So what we do is we package up our latest resources and news by every imaginable topic and subtopic, and the user can decide which ones they want. And it can be inserted into any other website in a few minutes. It's not technically complex, and it'll conform to that site's look and feel. So this is our latest employment news that is just arriving on a website that's actually a legal clinic in Belleville, Ontario. They don't have to do anything. As soon as we add anything new to our site, it's going to refresh their page. So for a lot of the kind of organizations we work with, this is not the case with the Belleville site, which is really robust. We can barely keep up with all the great stuff they're doing. But with a lot of the organizations, especially legal clinics, they have quite static web pages that might just have very basic information on their services and some links. But by having our feeds, they're able to have the latest stuff that's happening. So this is the Income Security Advocacy Center website, a specialty clinic in Ontario specifically for social assistance or welfare, and they get our latest resources showing up here, as soon as they are posted. And you can see that it conforms to various different sites' looks. And part of that also, that RSS service, is that it allows all this stuff to be automated, because the project staff here is me and only me, and then a very small collection of part-time people who work, in various locations, and they add up to about a person. So we have a very small, we're not complaining because it's great to have dedicated resources to the project, but we don't have a huge amount of staff resources, so we're able to do a lot of we're able to push out a lot of information to people who want to receive it automatically, and that's because we do everything through RSS, which is a nice little geeky way to have a huge impact. And I'll be at a staff meeting, and my coworkers will come back and say, how did you send me that bulletin when you were sitting with me at the staff meeting? And I'll kind of laugh and say, it's all automatic. But basically, the site automatically checks at 4 o'clock if anything new's been added, and it formats it nicely, and out it goes to 1,200 subscribers. And since we started doing that, the traffic to the site's gone up by about 30%. So it's a nice little trick, I think, to help people remember to go to your website. I mean, certainly my audience is bombarded with more and more websites that they're asked to be loyal to, and it's really hard to remember. And so this goes to them, and they click through to the ones that interest them. And so it's a little easier to get the information to where people are rather than constantly expecting them to go back to where you want them to go. So these are, we have a huge amount of custom statistics and analytics that we produce for our funder and just for our interest. And these are examples of the kind of reports that we have and we look at, and we generally produce and send to the Law Foundation. We have a search report, that's a log for every good and bad meaning a search that gets no results. And that way we can find out what kind of words people are using in the keyword search. And we can look at language downloads and comparing that against things by topic and that kind of thing. And these are all customized reports. And we also can look at the number of webinars and how many people have attended them and the results of all of the various surveys that we do. And we also have a relatively big social media presence in the last year. So around the time we started doing the webinars, we finally got on Twitter and Facebook. And that's been really, really, I think, successful experience in terms of getting us new audiences and getting us new content, making new connections. So we always try to track that sort of stuff to justify the return on investment, so to speak, but also just to kind of look at some of the trends and who's following us and that kind of stuff. And for the people who are interested in sort of technology and tools and that kind of stuff, these are some of the tools that we integrate into CLEONet. So our site is a custom website application, but we use Drupal for a bunch of separate sites. We use WordPress for blogging and Basecamp for project management, and we use a ReadyTalk tool for webinars and so on. And I'm happy to talk to anybody and everybody about all of that kind of stuff, perhaps at the conference in person or anytime. And so I wanted to talk about portal-specific challenges that we have encountered. I mean, you do a project this long, you have lots of challenges, and we're not perfect, but I thought these might have some, these might be meaningful to the people on the webinar, because this is the whole point, is to kind of talk about the portal approach. And there's certainly some advantages that I think Drew and I have tried to outline, but there's some real challenges, and I don't know if Drew and Brenda and Janet these would be true for Clicklaw. I suspect they are. But they might be something for all of you to think about if you're looking at doing a similar model or you are engaged in this kind of work. So the first one, I think, is if you decide that you are going to just create a website of your own information, your only challenge is making sure you do your own work. When you are a portal, the big challenge is keeping all of the producers and contributors engaged and sharing their materials with you, reviewing their listings, and providing feedback. So I think the trend here in Ontario with us and CLEONet has not been a reluctance to share. I mean, people have always been thrilled that they have stuff on CLEONet. I think they sort of don't always get back to us when we ask them to review their listings. And certainly we also have a tool where they can maintain their own listings, but there hasn't been a huge amount of uptake on that because generally there hasn't just been a lot of comfort with technology. There's been a lot of gratitude that we do this for them. But we have had to use a lot of strategies using sort of automated email-based review reminders. We try to do a lot of tracking. We do annual email-based messages that remind people what their holdings are, give them all the stats on their holdings, and gently remind them to get back to us. And despite technology, we also have to follow up with personalized outreach, and we don't have a huge amount of people to do that, so that can be a challenge to maintain that producing organization feeling engaged and committed to the project. The next challenge is managing growth. When we launched, we had 500 unique pieces of PLEI on the site. Certainly by about a year ago, we had over 1,200. And you can just say that that's great that you have more and more and more, but to the user, do they want to encounter 8 slightly different fact sheets they have to click through that seem to be about the same topic? So you have to, that notion of, is it always better to just have a bigger and bigger and bigger collection? Is it going to be up to date? Is it going to be accurate? Is there going to be a tremendous amount of duplication? And is that going to be onerous for the user, particularly if the user is in the public and they're experiencing a lot of stress with their legal problems? So, how do we do that? We send out those annual review emails I mentioned, and we also try to do annual consolidations to reduce duplication and remove out-of-date materials from the collection. And that can be kind of a challenging, painful process for us because some of these really small organizations, you know, they may not be updating that particular wonderful resource because they got one-time project funding to do it, and they can't stand by it whether it's legally accurate anymore, and sometimes it's painful for us to have to take it down because, you know, it's a great piece of work. It isn't online anywhere else. So these are some of the things that can be quite hard in terms of managing growth because it isn't automatically going to be better just to have more and more stuff. You know, even despite a really nice taxonomy, it can be really challenging for the user to sort through all of it. And then the last thing, I think, which I think Clicklaw has handled really well, and I hope that when we launched our site in 2005, we didn't have complicated subtopics. We just had high-level topics and keywords, and we certainly had to bring in a whole layer of subtopics to manage it. But again, when you just produce your own information, you can have your own topics and subtopics, and people can just know what your site, when you say landlord and tenant, that's where you find something on eviction. But when you have over 250 producing organizations, they're all going to use different terminology for their own work. So in the experience of violence against women, domestic violence, family violence, partner abuse, that term alone, that topic, if you will, has been used just in Ontario, probably over 12 different basic terminology is used. So for us to try and make it a consistent experience for the user to get the same information is really challenging because all of the groups weren't using a common preferred vocabulary or a taxonomy in any way. So in addition to us trying to create one to guide the user in particular ways toward the term we use on our site, which is partner abuse, we also created some custom search tools so that when somebody enters domestic violence, we have a suggestion automatically that guides them toward our topic. But we also have a custom script that runs every night that searches for the quote-unquote wrong word and automatically inserts our preferred one into hidden keywords across the entire collection. And that's just one of those little tools that we try to do to, it would be very onerous for us to manually tag everything. Plus, terminologies change. So certainly over the years, certain terms have become have no longer been in use, or particular government programs will change the name of. So some people still call things unemployment insurance or workman's compensation and that kind of thing. So we also have ways to kind of put the quote-unquote wrong term or the non-preferred term. We have ways to try and guide the user. And the last thing we do is that we try not to make keyword searching the easiest thing to find on our site, which kind of goes against some usability standards, but we're trying to make people use our topic and subtopic structure first. And then, of course, they can do a search after the fact. And then we try and do some of these little tools to help guide people back around. But with more sites like Clicklaw and CLEONet existing, and you'll see lots of commonality between our taxonomies, I think this will become easier over time, that the user won't be left sitting at a Google search box, overwhelmed, not having any idea how to do a search. Certainly when we started CLEONet, I could see that people were entering big, long sentences, like, I have fibromyalgia and my employer won't let me, and they would get nothing. And so certainly it's going to be easier as more and more organizations like those of you out there start to kind of put your mind to thinking about how to gather information and organize it in clear ways. So in terms of what's next for CLEONet, I'm just going to wrap up here so we can get to questions. We are going to be redeveloping CLEONet into a new site for the public. It'll have everything CLEONet has now, but it'll also have more original online PLEI information designed for use by the public. So that means short introductions to legal topics, common questions, similar to the wonderful ones that have been produced by Clicklaw, and some interactive quizzes. And we are also planning to do an interactive services map for Ontario. And we have an organization called Find Help that runs the 211 phone service. We're hoping to work with them so that we don't do duplication. But we also have a whole network of community legal clinics that are funded through Legal Aid Ontario, and they offer a phone service. So we're trying to work in partnership so that we don't duplicate, but definitely there's a need on a website in Ontario for an easy way for people to combine what problem they have or issue they need help with where they live to find clear pathways in an interactive servicing map. So we're going to be doing that. And we're going to do a lot more webinars and other kinds of online training for community workers. But we have limited resources, so we're going to do it in stages. So we're hoping to have the new site, which we're going to be calling yourlegalrights.on.ca, launching in September. So I said that out loud. Now I have to make sure it's true, but that's certainly our goal. So we're excited, and we're busy wireframing that and figuring figuring all that stuff out. So I'm hoping at the conference to learn a lot from all of you and also share some great ideas about, you know, the best way to do this, because we all look at our sites now and wish they could be better. So this is the chance to design from scratch to some degree. So that's the end of my, I know first of all, I'm sorry that I talked too fast, but that is the end of my actual presentation. And I'm hoping now we still have some time for lots of questions to either Clicklaw or CLEONet. So would I just over to you?
We've actually taken control here to look at the questions. Thanks very much, Fiona. That was great. Now, we haven't got much time here. We have some keep in touch information on the screen. We want to acknowledge the questions. There have been a couple of comments, several questions, and we think we might be able to keep going.
Hi there. I'm not sure if I'm not hearing anything right now. So hopefully that's just one of those momentary glitches that seems to be happening. But if there are questions that have okay, if there's any questions that people have their hands up, or if they could type a question into the chat. Oh, I see. There's one here. Let's see. There's a question here. Fiona, could you talk a bit about how CLEONet decided on a separate website for the public versus a separate part of the existing site? I'd be happy to answer that. I'm just concerned that no one can hear me right now. And somebody's saying we can only hear you, Fiona. Well, I don't think it's intentional on anyone's part that they can only hear me, but it is nice to know that you guys can hear me. So I will answer that question. Sorry about that. It's a little distracting. Okay, so the question is, why did we decide to have a site for the public and aim it at service providers instead of having kind of the two-door approach? That idea of here's the site for the public, here's the site for service providers. I think one of the challenges in all the different web projects I've worked on before is that oftentimes, certainly when I go out and talk to service providers, what they're looking for is information for their clients. So they're going to very much take on that role. They're going to go through the client door, and they're going to want to get all that information, and they're less interested in identifying themselves as one kind of person or the other. So for us, we wanted to make sure the site absolutely made sense and worked for the public, but we wanted to do outreach and promotion to service providers for reasons of legal accuracy, for reasons of the scope and scale of the project, for reasons that we probably weren't in a position to do outreach to the entire province. It also is a way for us to, I think, get to a point where now we feel a lot more confident that we have a good model that would actually be very helpful to the public. I'm not certain if that's what that kind of answers the question. Also, having worked in the sector and a whole bunch of other kinds, nonprofit sector and a bunch of other web projects, a lot of the time when you create those kinds of, this one's for service providers and this one's for the public, oftentimes the service providers don't often end up having a lot of dialogue with one another in an interactive website just because they're so swamped helping clients. And so I didn't foresee, and certainly on none of our outreach sort of called for a place where community workers wanted to necessarily dialogue with each other. They kind of just wanted a place where they could find the information. And so that's why we sort of created a single site.
Thanks, Fiona. It's Drew here. Can folks hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now, but people.
Okay, we're seeing yes come up on the chat, so that's great. So we're back on stream. We'll go another 5 minutes if folks can indulge us, just to handle a few of the questions that have come in. So I'll jump back to one that Deborah Doherty asked here earlier. She asked this one of me, which was.
Who's on the Q&A? Who's on?
Deborah in New Brunswick was curious why the Lost Start program and how does that fit in? Why is it needed? And what we're trying to do with that is tie together the different, qualitatively different ways that people could potentially want to access legal information online through Clicklaw and the help map, but then in public libraries where information is available in public libraries around BC to a greater extent through our Law Matters program, and then also in our courthouse libraries. So think of it as Law Start BC is the array of possibilities online, public libraries, courthouse libraries, and then Clicklaw and the Help Map are focused in on providing access to those resources that are online. We also had a question from Kelly in Prince Edward Island. Would a model like Clicklaw work in a very small jurisdiction like PEI? Have there been similar models in small places? Fiona, I'll invite you to comment on this one too, but I'll start off by saying this is one area where I'm particularly personally eager to hear from the law help experience in the United States, where law help has been put into 28 states, and in other words, it's been syndicated across 28 different states, both big and small, and I'm very eager to learn how that experience has gone, because this I think is a great question from Kelly about how a model that's been developed in one jurisdiction can port to another jurisdiction. Fiona, did you want to add any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, no, I was just interested in a discussion generally on whether it's it's always a question of the best thing to do is for a particular community geographically to do this, or whether you start to see topic-based portals so you start to see particular projects just around family law, where particular organizations come together with that focus, provided they're all in the same like the Family Law Education for Women project, which a whole bunch of organizations in Ontario came together and did family law PLEI work with a website for particular populations that were of women who were greatly underserved and who had high needs in this family law area. I think in terms of a smaller community like PEI, I wouldn't be an expert, but I would say that I often feel that, the notion if you build it, they will come, and what I often say is if you build it, they won't. And that you have to create a reliable sort of set of really good information so that you build up loyalty prior to expecting contribution, which is, so I think that if there was a lead organization that you felt could come up with a good enough base of information, like we took a long time to collect our little library before we let the outside world see it, so that we hoped that by the time we went live, we had enough stuff that we had good coverage of the topics we were presenting, rather than kind of going live with a site that had huge buttons everywhere and begging people to share. So I think as long as you feel that you have a collection of information that is quite valuable and relatively comprehensive, then I think it's really about whether you have enough content coverage to sort of cover the needs of the users. And if there's a lead organization that has a really strong collection, then I would think anyway, certainly, that a smaller scale version of this in a smaller jurisdiction would be successful. I don't know if that's a very clear answer. Would you agree with that, Drew?
Yeah, I think those are great points.
We just wanted to point out some of the comments that are in the Q&A feature in the bottom of the right hand of the screen. So Lois Gander in Edmonton is saying, in considering when portals are appropriate, I think the ACJNet LawNet experience demonstrates that they can provide very useful service when collaboration isn't possible. And she also has the comment, as we look at portals, I think it is useful to keep in mind who they're designed for and what they are providing access to. Like libraries, PLE portals have somewhat different mandates, some more general and others more specific.
And that really ties into some of your comments, Fiona. And I think it's great that as part of the webinar series, we're going to be one of the sites that's going to be featured is POVNet, which has a specific mandate within British Columbia and even beyond for serving the community of those working in anti-poverty work.
Should we just continue with questions? Colin Lachance asks, what is the interest level of PLEI users in primary legal sources, such as statutes and cases, and do your organizations have direct relationships with primary source providers? Drew, do you want to?
Sure, I'll jump in on that. Certainly with Clicklaw, the accent is very much on the information that's been designed for or accessible to the public. There's a page called Laws, Cases, and Rules that does have links into some of the key sources of primary legal information, statutes and cases. But that's not the primary role at all of Clicklaw. We're blessed in Canada with the CLEO website, which is one of the key sites that we link off to from the laws, cases, and rules page on Clicklaw, where they, at CLEO, I think, are doing an amazing job at providing direct access to primary law for Canadians. Fiona, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we've never had any, I don't think we've had any interest from our users on having sort of direct access to that sort of stuff. And certainly I think what they want is stuff that is considered clear language and information that is, not legalese that they can give to a client when they themselves have no legal training. The second part of the answer, we here in Ontario have like a huge network of community legal clinics, and all of them do direct casework, primary legal services to low-income people who qualify. And so we are one of those clinics. We do public legal education, but the other clinics all around Ontario, we work closely with them. So certainly our webinars are given by providers direct legal services to the clients. So the people who've given our webinars will say, we're seeing a lot of this particular thing in our region. So it's very practitioner-based. And certainly a lot of the producing organizations who have material on CLEONet have those materials are written based on stuff that they've seen that people needed to know about who walked in the door. So I think that although that might not be stuff that we do directly here at CLEO, our work's really grounded in that sort of direct service model. The other, just a small thing, there are services that clinic lawyers and clinic people who work at clinics who work directly with clients. There's certain legal, the LAO provides certain services to them through a clinic resource office, and there have been some people in our advisory group who wish that there are people who work with clients but who don't do it formally in the legal aid system, and oftentimes they wish they could get access to some of that assistance, quote unquote, but certainly none of our users directly have ever been interested sort of in getting access to primary legal material. I think they're grateful that they don't just have to look at that stuff, because to people like myself who aren't lawyers, it's not exactly easy to understand.
Okay, we'll just take one last question from the Q&A section from Sarah Doherty. How do you vet organizations that you're partnered with to ensure info they feed to you is legally accurate? Drew, do you want to?
Sure. So with Clicklaw, we're relatively new, 2 years in now, and what we've been doing so far is that we have leaned on the organizations that we are working closely with to have their own mechanisms in place for maintaining legal accuracy. We have also got an editorial committee for Clicklaw that provides an oversight role or assists us with an oversight role, but we're not in the business of reviewing legal accuracy here, and we're not, as I say, we're really leaning on that role being done at the organization level that develops the content. And that's part of the strength, if you will, of a portal, which is that the content development stays with the organizations that have that kind of expertise, and the portal focuses on enhancing access to all that information. Fiona, any final thoughts on?
Similar answer. It was certainly something that we were really, really concerned about, and we, went over that in great detail with all of our early user testing, and that's one of the reasons that our audience, when we launched, was community workers, is that we were concerned about legal accuracy, that CLEO has certain standards that we apply to our own plea work, and a discard list when we feel that something's no longer legally accurate, we make it completely unavailable to people to get a hold of it, and we couldn't bring that kind of standard into the work of others. So we do that by maintaining, we have very clear guidelines. We have some legal accuracy checklists and lots of articles on the site that try and help educate people generally, but oftentimes it's that we work within a relatively, an informal but well-known network of existing organizations that have a good reputation for doing this kind of work, and then we send them lots of reminders so that they remember that their stuff is on the site, and we ask them to get back to us and insist that they do to make sure that they still stand by it enough that they want it here on the site. And then, of course, we have all the disclaimers to explain to people that that's sort of the best that we can do. But that's always a big challenge. One of the things that we will probably confront just as more and more private bar lawyers and law firms start to use blogs to do some general legal information, is that we often have guidelines that it can't be information produced at a cost, that there are organizations that, generally have to be nonprofit or government. So we have certain guidelines that we may, want to be looking at to, in the future, as more and more different kinds of organizations just put more and more information online. But that's one of the ways so we've gotten lots of information that seems terrific, but we can't, it's an organization that doesn't have sort of a stable, they can't be communicated with through a phone and email, and they're not a registered nonprofit, and there have been times when we have been unable to post their information because we can't provide a clear way for the user to get a hold of them for more details and that kind of thing. So certainly that's a big challenge. So that would sort of be our answer. So we handle it by policy, by some workflow outreach stuff, and also hopefully by having good links to good producing organizations that we already knew and worked with prior to doing the project.
Great, thanks, Fiona. I think what I'll do is just a quick wrap up here. And just to remind people of the 2 dates of the upcoming webinars, January 25th, February 8th. And also the dates of the national conference, February 23rd, 24th, just to click away.ca. And finally, thanks to our presenters and to the Law Foundation of Ontario and to all of you for participating. Thanks, and we'll see you next time in the next webinar.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.